The Breeders' Cup Classic. It's the big one we've all been waiting for, and Flightline is the big name in this year's Breeders' Cup. He may just be too good for these horses, is perhaps as big a favor as we'll see on the entire Breeders' Cup weekend. Play the Breeders' Cup Classic, play the Breeders' Cup races, play all the races every day, everywhere through NYRA Bets. Head on over to NYRABets.com. We'll give you a free $25 play and a $200 deposit match if you use the promo code CUP25 and Flightline. One thing I will pretty much guarantee you, the Breeders' Cup Classic won't look like this. Now, Flightline might run as well as he did in this race, but I don't think you're going to see the competition 19 1/4 lengths behind at the finish because the competition is exceedingly steep in here. And it's a very, very different race for Flightline than the Pacific Classic. He's going to have to deal with the early speed of a very talented runner in Life is Good. And Life is Good isn't going to just throw in the towel at the half-mile pole. He's going to fight him because he's a very good horse. He's not as good as Flightline. And I think Flightline will put him away. But in doing so, will he use himself enough that it softens him up for some very talented runners, particularly a couple of 3-year-olds behind him? And I think it opens up the possibility of him losing. I'm not really trying to beat him in here, but I do think this is going to be a dramatically different race for him. But we saw in the Met Mile that he can win under adversity. He didn't break. He rushed up. A good horse at that time in Speaker's Corner shut him off. He had to make a trip out of that, and he still ran a 112 buyer and won very impressively in a big race. Flightline is good. Probably too good for these, but the competition is stern in here. This is a strong field. Let's take a look at Life is Good's Whitney 2-back. And I know he didn't run as well from a figure standpoint last time in the slot, but I think that's a bit concerning. But he was pretty impressive in this Whitney. He beat Happy Saver, who I think fourth place finish for him would be quite an achievement. We'll see if he can clunk up for a spot. And one of my favorite horses, Hot Rod Charlie, we'll talk more about in a bit. And he dominated him. He was just better than them, and he's shown the kind of horse he is. He can run fast early, and he can still finish at 9 furlongs. I know, he didn't get it done in the Dubai World Cup in 1 1/4. I think it was a very fast pace, but it's going to be a quick pace in here. I don't know. I wonder, what I worry more about is not just taking the pressure from Flightline, because he's going to have to go to the lead, going to have to put away Flightline, and then hold off the closers. That's a Herculean task. I also worry that maybe he's tailing off at this point. I'm a huge Life is Good fan. I think he's a terrific racehorse who's had a terrific career. I just don't know if this is going to be the right race for him. Hopefully, for the connections, I'll be wrong. Epicenter and Rich Strike in the Travers. This was kind of the race that Rich Strike showed in finishing fourth, that his Derby was no fluke. He ran a 105 buyer and ran well, but he was no match for Epicenter, who just crushed the field. This was Epicenter's last race. I'll trust in Steve Asmussen, bring into this race off of a 2+ month layoff, 2 months and a week. And Epicenter is the kind of horse that he ran the race that we've been waiting for from this 3-year-old crop. He absolutely destroyed the field this day with a 112 buyer. He has speed. He can be forward, but he's also comfortable rating now, and he's probably the main threat to Flightline. He ran fast enough that if Flightline gets softened up and he's taken a step forward, that he could be real competition for Flightline, and I think he makes it very, very dangerous for him. I think the same could be said for Taba. I am a gigantic Taba fan. I think he is a sensational racehorse. And to win the Sanity Derby in his second career start, just a month after breaking his maiden at 6 furlongs, then to show no real problems after running in the Derby, a race he just shouldn't have run in where he ran 12th, runs second the Haskell, probably was best that day. Didn't really like running inside and just crushed the field. Good trip or not, but he was forward in here. Now, is he a horse that needs to be too forward? Is he going to be too close to Flightline and Life is Good? Is he the one that's going to come calling first and try to make a run at Flightline? And if that fails, it softens him up for a horse Epicenter has run faster races. They're all reasonable questions, but he's a good horse, Taba, and I think he's going to make his presence felt in this race along with Epicenter. Are they likely to beat Flightline? No, they're not, but they are not pushovers, and this pace could be pretty quick. And a horse that just hopes they're ripping up front, and even though he has the speed to put himself into contention, and he used that speed to win a Grade 1 the Jockey Club Gold Cup, I think Olympiad can sit a little bit farther off. And the thing I liked is that Olympiad showed in this Gold Cup, his Grade 1 win, that he just didn't show up in the Whitney for whatever reason. He put it behind him, and he's run some good figures. I don't know if he's fast enough. His one really strong fig, the Stephen Foster, it's a bit of an aberration. He's more of a 103 to 105 buyer type. Now, I think Bill Mott will have him ready to run a good race in here, and I hope he does run a good race, but I just don't see it because there's better closers in Epicenter that are faster, that are improving. And while I'd love to see Olympiad do well in here, I'm a fan of his. He's a very cool horse. Tough Breeders' Cup Classic. There's some Breeders' Cup Classics he might have been the choice in. This is not one of them. Hot Rod Charlie and Rich Strike, we got to talk about one of my favorite horses, Hot Rod Charlie, who sadly for me, he never really ran back to his sensational performance in the Belmont Stakes, though his Pennsylvania Derby last year was very good. And he got it done here. Now, I'm not going to get into the whole nonsense of the saddle slipping and all that, because I think Rich Strike was just leaning on Hot Rod Charlie, and he let Hot Rod Charlie get energized and come back on him. But the thing I like is that Rich Strike has shown that his Derby was no fluke. We don't want the Derby winner to be a fluke, and while it seemed fluky that day, he's come back with some good races, and I guess if you think this race is going to fall apart, good old Rich Strike can come running. He's going to have to come running a little faster than he ever has in the past. You think his Derby was an upset? If he beats Flightline, it'll be an even bigger upset in this race. This Classic is an extremely exciting race and one that's been talked about for a long, long time. For many of us, ever since our jaws dropped when we watched Flightline win the Pacific Classic. He's very good. I'm not trying to beat him in here. I picked him on top. Over Taba and Epicenter with Olympiad fourth. I'm against Life is Good in this race. I wish him well. I don't think he'll be the second choice. I'm not even sure he should be the third choice in this race behind the 3-year-olds, but can't wait for the Breeders' Cup Classic and all the Breeders' Cup action this weekend at Keeneland. And best way to play the races, all the races, every day is NYRABets. Head on over to NYRABets.com, use the promo code CUP25, and we will match the $200 of your initial deposit, plus give you a free $25 play. Good luck.